please sing along with us. You have the lyrics in your bulletin.
Welcome to the Ogunquit Baptist Church. We're gathered here today to celebrate Good Friday, to stand in reverence and remember the sacrifice that happened here on this day in history. We have a little bit planned for you guys. If you just take a look at the bulletin, you'll see everything that's going to happen. And to start, I will be doing a song called Sweetly Broken. To the cross I look, abundant life have I been given through Christ crucified. You called me out of death, you called me into life. I was under your wrath, now through the cross I'm reconciled. At the cross you beckon me, draw me gently to my knees, and I am lost for words, so lost in love. I'm sweetly broken, only surrender. And of the cross I must confess. How wondrous your redeeming love, and how great is your faithfulness. At the cross you beckon me, draw me gently to my knees, and I am lost for words, so lost in love. I'm sweetly broken, only surrender. Amen.
This reading is from Matthew 27, 45 through 54. From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Well, when some of those standing here heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split. The tombs broke open, and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs, and after Jesus' resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those who were with him, who were guarding Jesus, saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, surely he was the Son of God.
Welcome, friends. Thank you for being here on such short notice. Thank you for meeting with me, because I have something very important that I'd like to share with you. Something strange, something very strange happened to me. And I felt that I had to tell you, my closest family and friends. Let me start at the beginning. Under Pontius Pilate, our governor in Judea, I was the centurion in charge of the Jerusalem cohort. One of the duties of that position was to oversee crucifixions. We were commanded to take charge of the prisoner, flog them if it was so commanded, and then force them to carry the cross piece of their own instrument of execution through the city and out to the place of the skull. There, We would tie them, or, if so commanded, nail them to the cross and hoist it up into the air. Then we were required to stand a watch until the condemned was dead. Sometimes that took days. This was my duty as centurion, and so I carried it out. Over and over. Hundreds of times. I was cursed at and spat on. I was pleaded with and offered bribes. I saw hardened criminals descend into blubbering and begging, and others who had lost all hope welcomed death with open arms. You have to develop a strong mental shell in order to do that work over and over. You have to harden your heart like a stone. Because crucifixion is not like killing in battle. That's what I thought I would be doing when I joined the legions. In battle, there's glory and honor and an enemy that has a fighting chance. In battle, you can show mercy to the wounded and honor to the dead. Not in crucifixion. But I am a good soldier and a dutiful Roman, and so I did it. I did it for a long time, until the faces became blurs and the terrible became mundane. Until one day when a man named Jesus of Nazareth was handed over to us. I'd heard of this man. He was supposed to be a prophet with some kinds of strange teaching. Word was that he was peaceful, though, that he preached love and duty. Our Roman agents reported that the crowds that followed him had offered on numerous occasions to help him overthrow us and make himself king, but that he had always refused. The Pharisees and Sadducees hated him, though. He had argued with them too often. He had criticized them too harshly. And probably most of all, he had disrupted their money changers in the temple. So they arranged for his death. A midnight arrest, trumped up charges, a kangaroo court trial. It's a very simple thing to label your political or religious enemy as a criminal and then do whatever you wish to them. It happened before, and it will happen again. And so an innocent man was handed over to us for crucifixion. They surely hated him because they not only ordered him to be flogged, but to be scourged. A scourging could kill a man outright. And if he did not die at the whipping post, he surely would die within a few days. Then they ordered us to mock him and make fun of him. I'm sorry to say that some of my soldiers took great pleasure in this. So when we placed the crosspiece on this man's shoulders, they were already bloody and torn. He had already lost a lot of blood and he could hardly carry the heavy log. We marched him through the streets. My soldier with the whip kept him moving with frequent strikes. But before long, the crack of the whip grew silent. He was too injured for the whip to do any good. And besides, the way to the cross that day was strangely different than usual. There were a few in the crowd who mocked and shouted out insults, but mostly the crowd was silent. I could hear gentle weeping, and on occasion a voice would cry out, "He healed me. He gave me back my sight. He gave me back my brother. He gave me back my son." Finally, Jesus fell and could rise no more. So I pressed into service a large man who had been following along. He looked afraid at first. "What is your name?" I asked him. "Simon of Cyrene," he told me. "Let it be known that Simon of Cyrene shall carry the cross-piece for the condemned, but that he himself is a free man." That seemed to assuage his fear a bit, and he lifted the cross-piece to a strong shoulder. Without that weight, Jesus was able to rise, and we continued on to Golgotha without any further incident. To further show their hatred of this man, we had been ordered not only to tie him to the cross, but also to nail him there. Every option designed to increase this man's suffering had been chosen by our betters. Seeing his suffering, I called for the wine mixed with gall, a mild painkiller. I would ease his pain, a little at least, if I could. But after tasting it, he refused to drink it. So, we grit our teeth and nailed an innocent man to a cross and lifted him into the air. And then began a crucifixion unlike any I had ever seen. This man said things from the cross I've never heard another man say. He asked a young man who was standing in the crowd if he would take care of his mother. He spoke words of comfort and hope to the thief being crucified next to him, even though that man had just been mocking and insulting him moments before. Some of the chief priests had come to gloat. He completely ignored them and their jeers. And then he looked down at me, and our eyes met. And that gaze pierced right through my mental shields. And he saw me, the real me, the man who secretly hated what he was doing and who he had become. And then he prayed for me. While he was dying on a cross at my hand, he prayed for me. Without looking away, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Those words struck me like a physical force, and I stumbled back a step. staring up at him, my mouth agape. He held my gaze for a few moments. "I thirst," he told me. I blinked and quickly ordered the sponge with some of our sour wine. He drank it. And then strange things started to happen. Darkness fell over us. I looked up at the sky, but the sun was obscured. An eclipse? Today? Jesus looked up too and cried out something in Aramaic. Something incredible was happening right before my eyes. "It is finished," he whispered. Then he cried out again in a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And the earth started to shake, and rocks split, and this horrendous tearing sound came from the temple area of the city, so loud we could hear it way out at Golgotha. And his head dropped to his chest, and he died. And we just stood there, staring up at him, at his body on the cross. No one spoke. We were all in shock. And then finally, one voice broke the silence. And I realized it was my own shaky voice, growing stronger with each word. Surely, this man was the Son of God. All the people standing there closed their eyes and bowed their heads and beat their breasts, but then turned and left. Not me. I stayed. I stayed at the foot of that cross until some of my men came by to break the legs of the condemned, to hasten their deaths before the Passover. "He's already dead," I told them. They were surprised and wanted to break his legs anyway. But I suddenly felt that would be wrong. So instead I grabbed my spear and I plunged it into his side, all the way to the heart. And blood and water poured out. I couldn't continue as centurion of the Jerusalem cohort after that. I was owed a favor or two, so I pulled some strings and got reassigned. It's a demotion, technically, but I don't care. I don't want to preside over even one more crucifixion. I can't stop thinking about that man, Jesus of Nazareth. I've got to know more about him. A man who died like that while I watched. So I've decided I'm going to find his disciples and tell them what I witnessed. And if they'll have me, join them. Won't you come with me? Come with me. Because I swear to you, that is no normal man. this Jesus of Nazareth surely is the Son of God.
Will you stand with me as we sing our hymn, O Sacred Head Now Wounded, number 213 in your pew hymnals?
The shadow of betrayal. After he had spoken, Jesus was troubled in spirit and testified, "I tell you the truth, one of you is going to betray me." His disciples stared at one another, at a loss to know which of them he meant. One of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter motioned to the disciples and said, "Ask him which one he means." Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." Then dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, son of Simon. As soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered into him. "What you are about to do, do quickly," Jesus told him.
The shadow of darkness, Matthew 26:31-35. Then Jesus told them, "This very night you will all fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter replied, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." "I tell you the truth," Jesus answered, "this very night, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." But Peter declared, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And all the other disciples said the same.
The agony of the soul, Luke 22:39-44. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like the drops of blood falling to the ground.
The arrest at the garden, John 18:1-5. When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side there was an olive grove, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place, because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the grove, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them.
Matthew 27:27. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand and knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him, and they took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, They took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him.
The way of the cross, Mark 15, 21 through 32. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh. He did not take it, and they crucified him. Dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. It was the third hour when they crucified him. The written notice on the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 robbers with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days. Come down from the cross and save yourself." The same way the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Christ, the King of Israel, come down from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those crucified with him also heaped insults upon him.
At the 6th hour, darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing near heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling Elijah." One man ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down," he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus heard his cry and saw how he died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God."